All right, so what did you start off by doing? What was the first step? What did you find? You found who? How did you find that? What did you find? What term did you find first, I should say? The first term, T1. So that would be 1 minus 5 times 1, which was, I heard someone say -4. And then what was the second term you had to find? T17, good. And what did you get for T17? -84. Do we all agree? Okay. So we have our T1, we have our T17. So now to find the sum of the first 17 terms, it's always however many terms we're adding, which is 17, over 2, multiplied by T1 plus T17. And let's see, what did I get? I don't know if I typed this in. Did you get -748? -748. Who got that? -748. All right. Any questions about how we work through that Bell word question? All right. Let's go to our notes. I am skipping one question. I'm skipping over 5. We may come back to it at a later date. But right now, I want you to read number 6. This is an example of a word problem you may see on the quiz. So we have a brick staircase that has 30 steps. It has a total of 30 steps. The bottom step requires 100 bricks. Each successive step requires 2 fewer bricks than the prior step. So in this example, our staircase, the bottom will be my T1. So in this example, how many bricks did I use for the bottom step? So read it and figure out how many bricks for the bottom step. Not 2 bricks for the bottom step. How many bricks did it say in the second sentence for the bottom step? 100. Your common difference, because you're using 2 fewer steps, that means I'm not adding 2, I'm doing what? Reducing by 2. So my common difference would be -2. Go ahead and write your rule. So after you have your rule, we need to figure out how many bricks did they use at the top for the top step. Now, how many steps are in this staircase altogether? 30. That's a lot of steps. So you need to figure out how many bricks they use for the 30th step. So using your general rule, figure out how many bricks they use for the 30th step. And who got 42 bricks? All right, so now you need to figure out how many bricks they use for all 30 steps. So the sum for the 30 steps will be 30 divided by 2, multiplied by how many steps, how many bricks for the first step? 100, plus how many bricks for the 30th step? 42. Type that in your calculator. And that tells you the total number of bricks. So that should be 2,130 bricks. Who had that? 2,130 bricks. All right. Any questions about arithmetic? So now we're going to go and talk about a new type of sequence. And this is called a geometric sequence. So 12.3 is geometric. This is homework 26. We only have 27 homeworks and we're done. So homework 26 is geometric sequences. That's due next Thursday. Homework 25, which is over arithmetic, is due tomorrow. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our geometric. Let's look at this sequence here. So 2, 4, 8, 16. What's the pattern? What am I doing? Multiplying by 2. Good. So what would be the next number? 32. After 32, what would come next? After 64, 128. After 128, 256. Good. All right, so this is a geometric sequence. Whenever it's a geometric sequence, go ahead and fill this in. This is the general rule that you're going to use for a geometric sequence. For a geometric sequence, you always have T1 times your multiplier to the power of n minus 1. So we have to know T1. We have to know the common ratio, which is our multiplier. What am I multiplying by? And we have to know how many, the term number. And I want you to add this. I'm actually going to write it a different way. To your section, because I feel like with the geometric, sometimes it's harder to figure out what we are multiplying by. So one way is to take T2 and divide that by T1. So if we're multiplying by a fraction or a decimal, it can be a little challenging to figure out what that is. So go ahead and add that formula too. So if you know it's geometric and you're not sure what we're multiplying by, just take T2 and divide it by T1. All right, so I'll give you a minute to copy that down, and then we can go over a few questions. So arithmetic is adding, geometric is multiplying. All right, anybody need more time to copy down the formulas? All right, let's go ahead and get started. So let's look at number 1. The first thing we need to do is figure out if it's arithmetic or geometric. Then we need to identify the common difference or common ratio. So let's look at this first set of numbers. I went from 1 to 3, 3 to 9, 9 to 27. What kind of sequence do you think this is? Arithmetic or geometric? Geometric. And whenever it's geometric, we do not have a common difference. It has a common ratio. And the common ratio is what I'm multiplying by, and in this example, that would be a 3. So on the test or quiz, it will ask you, does it have a common difference or a common ratio? Common difference is arithmetic. Common ratio is geometric. All right, let's look at question B. What kind of sequence does this appear to be?
Arithmetic.
Arithmetic, I agree. So this is an arithmetic sequence, which means it doesn't have a common ratio. It has a common difference. And what is the common difference? -7. There you go. All right, so let's start practicing with geometric. So let's look at this first one. This is, again, it told me that it's geometric. So if you have a hard time figuring out the common ratio, just pick up your calculator. R is going to equal T2 divided by T1. So that would be 2 divided by 0.5. And you may know that it's 4 without doing that. But if you have a hard time figuring out what we're multiplying by, use that formula. So you do get that you have a common ratio of 4. So now that you know your common ratio is 4, go ahead and find the next 4 terms. Keep multiplying by 4 to find the next 4 terms. Eight times 4 is 32. 32 times 4 is 128. 128 times 4 is 512. And then 512 times 4 is 2048. All right, so now let's start writing our geometric rule. So to write your rule is T sub n, and that equals the first term, which is 0.5. Now, I always put my ratio in parentheses. That's just optional, but when you look at my answer key for the quiz review, you're going to notice that I put my ratio in parentheses. So I'm going to put the 4 in parentheses, and it's to the power of n minus 1. That is how you write your geometric rule. You don't have to put the 4 in parentheses if you wanted to put 0.5 times 4, but I just feel like that little dot might, I don't know, look like a decimal, so I just put it in parentheses. So go ahead and use this rule to find the 14th term. So it's going to be a big number, and that's okay. So 0.5 multiplied by 4 to the power of 14 minus 1. And when you type that in your calculator, you should get, so you get a lot of money. 335544 and 32. That's what you get. Any questions about that? How to type it in? Anyone not get that answer? You need help with your calculators? All right, let's keep going. All right, go ahead and figure out your common ratio. The numbers are getting smaller, so you can write your common ratio as a decimal or as a fraction. And again, if you're not sure what we're multiplying by, take T2 divided by T1. That's like the cheat method, and it works. So you can either write that as 1/4, or you can write it as 0.25. So now that you know your ratio, go ahead and find the next 4 numbers. when you write your rule, you should have T sub n equals your first number multiplied by your common ratio to the power of n minus 1. So go ahead and use that rule to find your 14th term, and it's going to be a small number. Excuse me, thank you. All right, that's what I got. It's a pretty small number. Just write it all out. All right, any questions about geometric so far? How to write it, it's multiplication, your rule looks different. You still need to know the first term, but instead of finding a common difference, you have a common ratio. Okay, let's keep moving. So for number 3, this is already written as the general rule. So just know that because it says common ratio, and anytime you see an exponent, so whenever there's an exponent, I know it's geometric. So this is geometric. The number in front is your first term. And then the base of my exponent is my common ratio. So for this one, we have a common ratio of 5/4. And it's asking you to list the first 4 terms. So I know my first number is -2. And go ahead and multiply that by 5/4 to get your next 3 terms. And you can write your next 3 terms as fractions or decimals. So I think most of you all will probably write it as a decimal, so I'm going to write it both ways. Okay, so again, I'm not picky on the test. Either way would be fine. I could do the fractions without a calculator, but the decimals, I need a calculator. So that's why I would probably only list it as fractions, but you have option. All right, just a couple more questions and we're done for today. I want you to try to do number 4 by yourself. We're going to do 4 and 5 and then in there. So take a few minutes, try to do question 4 by yourself. Yep. So this is the first time where you have a negative common ratio. So you have a negative common ratio for this example. Yep, we're gonna do 4 and 5 and then in there, yep. So yeah, take a minute, do 4 and 5, and then we'll end with those two. All right, anyone still working on 4 and 5? All right, let's go ahead and work through those together. So for question 4, what kind of sequence does it have? Geometric, which means that it has a common ratio. And my common ratio, if you have a hard time figuring it out, is going to be 160 divided by negative 40, which is negative, you can either write that, oh, I wrote that backwards. I'm sorry, y'all. Go back. It's always T2 divided by T1. So it would be negative 40 divided by 160, which you can write as a fraction, or you can write that as a decimal. So when you write your rule, negative. So you can say negative 1/4, or you can say negative 0.25. Who wrote it as a fraction? Who wrote it as a decimal? That's what I figured. Everybody probably wrote it as a decimal. All right, so when you write your rule, it would be the first term multiplied by your common ratio to the power of n minus 1. And then we can go ahead and find our sixth term. So T6 is going to equal 160 times, keep trying to drop the negative, don't drop the negative, to the power of 6 minus 1. So that would be negative 0.15625. All right, who had that for their T6? All right, good. All right, let's look at question number 5. So for question 5, again, we need to write our rule. So we need to know our common ratio, which would be negative 12 divided by negative 8, which can be written as, if you divide that by 2, 4, 3 over 2. Or you could write it as 1.5. So your rule is negative 8 times 1.5 to the power of n minus 1. And to find your 8th term, it would be negative 8 times 1.5. And then you have an 8 minus 1. So when you type that in your calculator, 8 times 1.5 to the power of 7, you get 136.6875. Who had that? All right, any questions about geometric? So we will finish out or continue in our geometric tomorrow. Homework 25, again, is due tomorrow. Homework 26 is due next Thursday.